You're listening to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. Season ticket holders and lifelong fans with neighborhood ties discuss Cubs news and neighborhood happenings. Here's your hosts, Jeremy and Pat.
One, two. Hello and welcome to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. This is episode 342 of the podcast. My name is Jeremy Deemer and I'll be your host. And I'm joined as always by my cousin. He's my co-host. He's usually high atop Wrigleyville, but he's out on the road on assignment tonight. Pat, how's Baltimore?
I can see Camden Yards from my window.
Very nice.
He's scouting. Jackson Holiday. He's down bad right now. He's
scouting for the World Series.
that too, yeah.
The dulcet tones you hear or see if you're watching on our YouTube channel, that's Cody Delmendo. You know him from his work at CHGO. Cody, thanks for taking time out to talk Cubs with us tonight.
Yeah, guys. Third or fourth time I've lost count. So I always enjoy talking to you guys. So thanks again for the invite.
You broke through to the recurring guest category. So yeah, absolutely. We love when you come on here, and the time always flies catching up and talking Cubs with you. So we've got a lot to talk about, Pat.
You're getting close to your 5-timers jacket too.
That's right.
I look forward to that.
We got a lot to unpack here, Pat. It was quite a week for the Cubs. 4-3 week.
Who predicted that?
That would be you. And I had more of a pessimistic outlook on this week, but the Cubs surprised me in Arizona. Now we'll get to the highlights of the week. We do need to talk about the news. We'll talk about Hendricks. We'll talk about Alzolay. We'll talk about Nico and Morel. We'll talk about these things. These are the things of the week. But first, we got to recap the week that was since last we podcasted, and that 3-game series in Arizona. I hate watching games in Arizona. These are miserable experiences. The Diamondbacks are no fun. These games were no fun, although the Cubs were able to take 2 of 3. Pat, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Cody. Let's talk about your thoughts on the Arizona series there, Pat.
I mean, look, I was glad to take 2 out of 3. That was sort of really, and going into that series, best case scenario against the team that was the defending National League champs. It happened in kind of a unusual fashion. So what we're noticing this year with the Cubs, and it's happening so much that I guess at this point we can't really be, I don't know if we can be disappointed. Are we allowed to say we should have done better, we should have done this, or is this just what we are at this point, right? Like, so the Cubs won that first game in the 11th inning. They could have won it much more easily and earlier. The second game, they had it won. They bullpen, I remember sitting there thinking, when it was like 11-8 or whatever, it's like, if we don't score another run, we're not going to win this game. I was texting our friend Dave for that. And sure enough, right? Like, and Cubs, of course, blew that game. But then they won the third game, which was really the important, I think, the getaway day game. Kind of drama-free, actually, on that one. And we beat a decent pitcher. And so, I came out of that feeling pretty good, but like we have in almost every series we've played, we felt like we dropped a game we should have won, right? And those things add up over time, but this season has been more so than even the last few seasons, I think probably because the Cubs are actually, we perceive them as better and actually like a playoff caliber team, so it matters more when they blow games they shouldn't blow, and also we're seeing them doing it repeatedly, which is frustrating because that these are games we're going to wish we had back at some point during August and September when we're sweating through a pennant race.
Yeah, Cody, we saw Bush hit his 5th consecutive game with a home run. We saw a great pitching performance from Wisniewski coming in and 4 innings pitched, 2 strikeouts, no walks. So there was a lot of positives thrown in with the Hendricks experience in the middle there.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm with you, Patrick. Like, they should have swept the series, of course. But to go to Arizona and, they did exercise the demons, because I was in Arizona last September and that was brutal. As we all remember, that was brutal. And for them to take game 1 of that series, and it was almost like, game 1 was it was like they made up for the 8-0 loss against the Padres.
Felt like they snuck one out there a little bit.
Right. Like they really didn't have any business winning that one, right?
But as a fan, anytime you win a game, you're like, nope, that's a win.
Yeah.
And you never say like we stole one, right? And
Right.
we look at the ones that got stolen from us, but we never
Right.
view a game as being us
Right.
stealing it. So in
Right.
fairness, we probably legitimately should have won 2 out of 3.
Right. Exactly. So yeah, it is what it is. The 11-8, like blowing that lead 11-8. There was one inning, I think Nico Horner hit a 1 out, or it was either had 0 outs or there was 1 out and he hit a triple, and they couldn't get the guy in for the insurance run. It was like the 7th or 8th inning.
Story of the week.
The moment that they didn't get him in, I knew that they were going to either blow the lead or in some form or fashion, it was going to loom large. And that is exactly what happened. But I was happy to see them really bounce back. And I think, despite all of the, games that they've blown, thanks to Alzolay and his struggles as a closer, they have always bounced back immediately in the next game. And I think that's a sign of a good team in some ways, which I'm sure we can talk about it more as we go along here. But that's kind of what I took away from that series, outside the fact that they went to an improved Diamondbacks team on the road and overall played well. So that was my biggest takeaway from that. And for them to finish the road trip the way they did, considering how it started, because it started in San Diego and then they go to Seattle and win there and win the series in Arizona, I thought it was pretty impressive how they were able to do what they did on that road trip, even though you can probably count 2 wins that they should have had on that road trip instead of, they went 5-4, but should have been 7-2, something like that. But
yeah. And I guess the frustrating part about the loss was that it was a game where they actually came back earlier in the game.
Yeah. They were
Hendricks
down
got
early.
torched, right? So to come back and take a lead after he got torched, it was like, okay, well, at least we're going to get a win out of a Hendricks start, because, we don't do that very often. And then we did it, so that was frustrating.
Yeah, I was in a hotel for that game. Otherwise, I would have turned it off when they got that out of hand. And I had it up in the hotel, and I watched the entire comeback, and I watched the whole thing. I stayed up until the end, and then Alzolay blows it, and it was just brutal. I felt it. It's one of those there's a communal experience happening right now. There's so many people all over watching this exact thing happen.
Like my dad texting me every 38 seconds.
There it is.
Commentary.
Yeah.
You think you've seen a lot of Cubs blown leads? Imagine in 78.
Fair. That's fair.
Well, the Cubs came back home for a series I think we all didn't feel great about. We all wanted to see the Cubs win this homestand, but there was cause for concern. The Marlins are always a weird team. It's always just weird playing them. And
but they're so bad this year.
Yeah, and boy, did that I think that was the real story from the Marlins side, was how terrible this team actually is. The Cubs win 8-3 with Tyone making his season debut. Looks promising. I think that we needed to see something like that, Cody, after some of the shaky pitching performances. It was a relief to see that.
Yeah, I mean, I was in the bleachers on Friday. It was a beautiful day, by the way. We've had
Thursday, by the way, the Thursday game, beautiful weather.
Yeah, I see what you did there. Yeah, I mean, the Friday game, obviously the best game of the weekend. You bring up the bad weather, and I think, not to make excuses, but I feel like if they don't have to play a doubleheader, I think they play the. You get a normal lineup in that day game on Saturday. I went off about it on today's podcast for CHGO Cubs. I hated the lineup that they put out there for Saturday, even though in some aspects you can argue that it was okay, since Wisdom should have had 2 home runs. Cooper probably should have had a home run, and I'm pretty sure someone else in there hit one to the warning track too. But with the wind and how it affected that game. In particular, maybe I should just shut up. But that game was all about Alzolay blowing the save. Do you
think it made sense to postpone the Thursday game because it was 59 and cloudy?
I don't understand, man. Like they should have done exactly what they did on Thursday for one of the Rockies games in that last game against the Dodgers.
Funny you should mention that. I was at that Rockies game and I got frostbite on my fingers because it was wind chill of 25 and it rained the entire game.
Yeah.
And yet we sat there for 3 full hours while the Cubs blew the lead and then came back and won. Right. And I thought, 59 and cloudy on a night game seems like pretty optimal weather in comparison. But apparently, I know the forecast didn't look great, but they missed that one.
Craig Counsell had to have been pissed, man.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I'm blaming Mother Nature more so than anything because I think that they just put out a normal lineup and you don't have to use the bullpen the way you did. Perhaps, throughout the entire series. That said, because of how things went, I hated the lineup considering you could have swept that doubleheader and then gone into a Sunday game with Kyle Hendricks and not have nearly as much pressure to win the series. I know that the team probably isn't looking at it that way, but we as fans are looking at it that way.
No, and the Marlins would have been on the plane already back out of town. They would have been looking at it like, who cares?
Right. It's true. That's probably one way to look at that. Probably
we haven't won this month at all anyway. So.
Yep.
Yeah. Who knows?
And the way the Cubs won that first game, Tan with his first game back, huge relief, I think, to see him pitch well and to sort of steady that rotation. We got him on that 4-year deal for precisely this type of thing, right? He's supposed to be a number 3 starter who could come in and certainly didn't pitch like that last year, but with Steele out and with Imanaga is your 2, but he's like a short 2, not size wise, although but in terms of he doesn't go deep into games, right? Or he hasn't, so far. So you're just desperately hoping that Taillon could come out there, pitch effectively, and get you some innings. And for his first game back, he pitched 5 innings, only gave up 1 earned run. I mean, and then the Cubs, got on top of them, and that was just kind of like a nice, easy game, the way you sort of you think it should go against the Marlins, right? And to your point, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think he would have gone longer in the game, but I think he was on a pitch count because it was his first start of the year, and he had the back injury. He could have easily gone 6 in that game. The way that it was going, the way he was pitching that game, it just, like you said, it looked like the Cubs had that game under control, in the first inning, especially after the Cubs scored off puck pretty quickly, So
the nice thing about Taillon is he's a horse too. Like when he's pitching effectively, he'll go 6 or 7 innings. Like that's not a problem for him. So. But to your point, coming off the heels of that kind of nice clean win, I guess you'd call it, 8-3 win, was that weird kind of doubleheader situation. And admittedly, like they should have swept the doubleheader, right? I mean, the first game, again, 9th inning at home against the Marlins. They've only scored 1 run all day.
Yep.
That's a tailor-made situation. You've got the lead. You wait for the best hitter on the team, the best power hitter on the team to come up in De La Cruz. You throw 2 balls. You're like, you know what? Just make him chase one. Like, don't throw it over the plate here, please. Because nobody else is going to hit a home run on this team. And what does he do? Cruz 1 2-run homer. And at that minute, you just kind of had a feeling they weren't going to come back and win in the bottom of the 9th. And they did not.
No.
Although they tried. It's just a very frustrating loss. You hate to lose a home game when you have a lead in the 9th inning, right? And the Cubs have done that a couple times, and it feels like that's the kind of thing that not only has caught up with them so far, but could continue to catch up with them is the thing. And then in the bottom of that 9th inning, they had a chance to actually tie the game after the Tachman base hit, and then Madrigal singled. You had first and second and nobody out. And Counsell made the decision, which more of a David Ross type decision, really, to sacrifice Amaya so you'd have second and third with 1 out. I get the logic, obviously. You've got a man on third with less than 2 outs. You figure you want to go for the tie. You're at home. Of course, we all know having a man on third with less than 2 outs is the kiss of death for the Cubs. Like, you never want that situation. If you're going to score, you're going to have to score from second or first or whatever. But he gave up an out. Great bunt, by the way. I mean, it was well executed. The play was executed. There's a 20% chance that would have just gone a disastrous pop-up, double-up play or whatever. But it went well. Canario comes up, doesn't look good, strikes out, and then was it Swanson after him? Horner came up and
round out to first, I believe.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I don't know what your thinking was at the time. I did text, I think it was my dad at the time, and I'm like, I don't know about giving up an out like that. You know, we've been trained under the Theo regime not to give up outs like that, and there are occasionally situations where maybe you do it. Was this one of them? I don't know. Ground ball pitcher, I guess. Idea being Canario might hit a double play.
To be honest with you, I didn't hate the bunt, and I'm not a bunt guy. I hate bunts. But in considering how the game went, considering the lineup the Cubs put out there for that particular game, I didn't hate it. Now, and I don't even hate that Canario took the at-bat, but I will say that I hate that Michael Busch and Cody Bellinger didn't get one at-bat in that game at all. And I understand that it's the doubleheader. I understand that, you're trying to get some rest. I think Ryan Herrera told me today that that Bellinger hadn't had an off day at all to start the year. But the thing is that like Busch didn't play on Friday and obviously didn't play on Thursday because of the rain out, quote unquote. Right. And so that to me, like, whether it's you want to blame how they did the ninth inning or whatever, I just blame the fact that you have Seiya Suzuki out. Ian Happ didn't play because of the hamstring that he tweaked on Friday, and you still didn't put Cody Bellinger or Michael Busch in the lineup. I understood they went up against Jesus Luzardo, who's a lefty, but Cody Bellinger was great against lefties in 2023, and he's in the middle of a hot stretch. He has like a 7-game hitting streak right now.
And last I checked, he didn't pitch a complete game either. So there were opportunities.
Yeah, exactly. So. Sure, the ninth inning we can criticize, if you're not a bunt guy. Again, I'm not a bunt guy, but for me, considering how the game went, how it was hard to score runs, I don't hate the bunt. You get 2 guys in scoring position with 2 chances, and Nico Horner was going to be one of those chances. He's a guy who puts the ball in play. He was red hot. I don't hate that idea, even though worst case scenario he comes up there with 2 outs. But maybe you pinch hit Canario, but at the same time, like. This is like I always laugh when fans, and I'm included in this too. I'm not like saying that I don't do this, but fans are, remember in September last year, Canario hits the grand slam and then David Ross doesn't play him for like the rest of the year, right? And we clamor to see some of these young guys get opportunities, right? Canario has like 30 some plate appearances, for his on the season or in his career, whatever, major league career. And like he was part of a major trade. I was intrigued to see what he was going to do in that moment. I as much as I think this team can make the playoffs, maybe make some noise, and hopefully take some momentum into the offseason to where they actually spend some real money and make this a real World Series contender, as much as I want to dream about that as we get to the end of the year and all that. I also know this year is also about answering questions about a lot of young guys. So the way that I look at it
was a very Phil Jackson moment. If you remember back to the Bulls of the 90s, where early in the season he would punt some games, sort of by putting younger guys or guys who aren't normally getting the ball at the late in the game, putting them in a position to have to make a play just to see what you do.
Yeah, and that's basically what I'm trying to say in a way. Is like I was intrigued to see what he would do there.
He struck out.
And he struck out, and he definitely, I think if anyone could just put that at bat out there and explain it in like one sentence, it was the moment got to him. It felt like it, he didn't shorten the swing once he got to 2 strikes. It was like he was swinging out of his shoes trying to make a play, but like
all you need to do is hit a fly ball. But he's such a big guy, he can hit a fly ball just like making contact.
Right. I agree. So. Hopefully you learned from it. He did hit a homer in the second game after. I guess for me, it's just like, again, people hated that David Ross would never play him. And now I saw on social media on Saturday that people hated the fact that he was even in the scenario to take the bat. So
yeah,
to me, it's like you gotta
Yeah.
it's a give and take thing for me with that. However, in that particular bat, if I were to, if we were to pinch hit for him, it would have been Bellinger or Bush for sure. And I would have been okay with that as well. And so it's rightful to have those opinions. I just, for me personally, I was okay that Canario took the bat. I'm just more upset that Bush and Bellinger didn't get any at bats at all in this game to begin with, So, obviously Alzolay blowing the save is the bigger story about it because he struggled this year. But you got to score more than 2 runs against one of the worst teams in the league, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, like, if it comes down to the 9th inning and whether you choose to bunt or choose to use Alexander Canario in that certain situation instead of Cody Bellinger or Michael Bush, what are we doing, man? Like, to me, they lost that game the moment Craig Counsell put that lineup out there, in my opinion.
So my one takeaway on, and I don't know what the sabermetrics would tell you about this, is that I really prefer like a bunt, and I might be wrong about this. To me, the bunt makes more sense if the game's tied than if they're down a run.
I agree.
Down a run, when the Canario comes up, then it's a make or break kind of situation. If it's a tie game, I feel like even for him, I think that the pressure is a little bit less, and the opportunity to score there. You have a choice on whether to send a runner on contact on a ground ball or not, depending on how hard the ball's hit. Fly balls obviously can score. It seems like a better scenario. But I am, I'm traditionally not a bunt person either, but I could see why you would want to bunt in limited circumstances. This was sort of one of those where I guess you could justify it.
I find it funny too, related to the bunt, because last year so many people would come into our CHGO Cubs YouTube chat and complain that they bunted too much. And then I saw on social media the other day, or I've seen on social media this year moments where they could have bunted but didn't bunt, and people complain about it. So it's like, again, I don't understand. You have to choose a side. But again, for me in that particular scenario, I was okay with it since they had struggled to score runs anyway. But also at the same time, you are giving away outs. So I don't know. I guess I was optimistic. Maybe I was too optimistic about Canario in the scenario, which obviously I was. And then, you needed Nico to get a hit, and he's red hot right now, and it just didn't happen. But
no, I think you're spot on about getting to see these guys in these moments, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Canario, Bush, Morel out in the field. Like, these are things that are questions that need to be answered ahead of the trade deadline, even to figure out what you need to supplement on this team to continue to try to push for the playoffs. One of the areas that's now a giant concern that was not a concern when we started this season was Adbert Alzolay. Let's talk about his struggles here, as he is now out of the closer role for now. He blew 4 of his first 7 save chances.
Were they all with home runs? I think so.
The one in Arizona, right, was a Marte homer.
Texas was a homer against a guy who never hit one.
Oh yeah, like Travis
Cruz was a homer.
Yep.
Yeah,
and then Saturday, whoever hit that homer. Yeah.
So
stuff.
He was so good last year. He was so good last year. He was in the top half of relievers in baseball. Is it the league figuring him out, getting more looks at him, and having a book on this now, or is this something hopefully that is that you hope, Cody, is fixable here?
I don't think that it's going to be fixable. That doesn't mean I don't think he can be a good reliever for the Cubs. I think he can still be effective in 7th, 8th inning setup man type situations. they still felt comfortable enough to throw him out there in the 8th inning yesterday. I know they were down 3 runs, but we've seen this team come back, so whatever. I thought after he gave up the home run on Saturday, the way he walked off the mound after the inning ended, the half inning ended, like you could just see like the confidence is just so shot right now.
If only Canario could have picked him up.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really know the main reason why he is giving up the homers, at least. But the reason that I don't believe that he can go back to being the closer is just that he just doesn't generate enough whiffs anyway. You can go back and look at a lot of his closing situations last year. I mean, I think there was a lot of hard hit balls that were, caught for outs, and the Cubs got away with it a lot. In my opinion. And I think we all would probably sit here and believe that you need more strikeout potential from your closer, considering today's game and how it works. So, I still think he can be effective, but I think I'm done with the closer role. Now, I'll say this. I'll admit that I was wrong about it because I came into the year just happy that the Cubs had named a closer and they had one that had closing experience, something they didn't have going into last year. So, it's frustrating. And that all said too, like I'm still okay that they didn't give all this money to like someone like Josh Hader or, like one of those guys. Just because I know how we know how this organization works. And like, if they give all that money to a reliever, they will not use it on someone that you will use every single day until proven otherwise. At least that's how I feel. So, for when it comes to the closer position, best case scenario for me now as a fan is that they develop the guy. And I hope
Ben Brown.
I'm hoping it's Ben Brown,
yes.
Maybe even Luke Little. I know Luke Little has had control problems, but you have a left-handed power pitcher who is a reliever. Like, when was the last time the Cubs had someone like that? I know, again, they're both rookie pitchers. They're both very young. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I couldn't name one. I rolled this Chapman. There you go.
Right.
To me, the best case scenario is that their closer is a guy that they develop and kind of groom into the role. Like, I'm not down to put Ben Brown in that role now because he's got 14 innings on his major league career. And Luke Little, hell, he's got some back to Iowa. I know. I think it's more about just needing fresh arms than the fact that he was pitching bad, but whatever. I just think that those two are going to be your best options down the road. In the present, I think it's going to be either Nearest or Leiter, but I would love to see Keegan Thompson get an opportunity just because he has pitched well and he has some experience pitching late in games back in 2022, and he's pitched in high leverage this year already. In extra innings even as well, which is even it's as high leverage as it gets considering the innings start with a guy on second base. So, I'm intrigued to see how they how it plays out. I hope they don't mess this up, but they can't keep giving games away like this.
They can.
Yeah, they can. They surely can. And I know that fans are like, we should go make a trade, whether it's if the Guardians keep playing well, Class A is not going to be available. I saw Cubs Twitter, just heart-izing Mason Miller for the Athletics today and what he did against the Yankees. And I get it, but I just don't. I mean, I don't know why the Athletics would trade him, considering he's so cheap and so young and whatever. But so, yeah, I mean, you have the prospect capital to where you could trade for him. But the thing is you're not going to be able to trade for one now. I don't think any team is out there trying to just give away their, a guy that could just be used as massive trade bait, at the deadline to get the best deal you can get. Like,
What
you
if the
got
Cubs bought 100,000 tickets to A's games? Would that sweeten the deal?
maybe for John Fisher, maybe, I don't know.
Same.
But like there's those options. I still think though, like the best case scenario is if you can develop a guy, and like they've never really been able to do it, but they have
Hector Rondon.
Yeah, I guess he was a Rule 5 guy, but we all knew that he wasn't going to be the long-term closer either. Like that's how I view Albert Alzolay, honestly, as another form of him. So I don't know, man. It's annoying that they couldn't.
Carlos Marmol.
Yeah, okay, you got me there. It's annoying that they couldn't, address this in the offseason like they probably should have, but
It's
it is
one
what
of
it
many
is.
on the pile. Yeah.
I think a lot of people are surprised that it's been this bad for Alzolay.
Yeah.
Like I didn't expect him to blow 4 games in April. I expected him to blow some games, but I didn't expect it to be 4 in 1 month,
Sad part about the Cubs is there was a time when the Cubs were to closers what the Bears were to running backs. When you had Gale Sayers and then Peyton and then Neil Anderson. Cubs had Bruce Sutter, and then they had
Lee Smith.
That was a long stretch of good closers they had that they developed themselves. But I would say I'm not as pessimistic about Alzolay's value, but I do think he needs to be taken out of the closer's role currently because of his psyche. One thing I noticed is that Alzolay and Hendricks both, since we're on the topic of pitchers who suck, are giving up way, 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 way more home runs this year than they ever have before. Both of them. And they're also walking more batters than they've walked before. And I do feel that there's a control aspect to this. So both of them are having trouble with their control. And when they do, they get into like the home run to De La Cruz on a 2-0 pitch, right? They're having trouble when they're falling behind, and they're having trouble locating their pitches. And with Hendricks, if he can't locate his pitches, he's toast, right? And he's been toast a lot lately.
Yeah.
So I think that's a key element to that. Now certainly Alzolay, although he's got less of a track record than Hendricks, also has better stuff, I think, ultimately. So he has more of a chance to turn it around. I don't think that he is going to continue to give up 3.4 home runs per 9 and walk 3 point whatever batters per 9. It's just that's not his game. I think his home run to fly ball ratio is like 40% or something ridiculous, right? That isn't really sustainable in a negative way. But having said all that, they do need to come up with some better options for the short term. Maybe let him work his way back up in the 7th inning and maybe the 8th inning, and I think if Ben Brown, who is my actually preference right now for closer duties, if Ben Brown could develop into a closer and you had Neris and Alzolay in the 7th and 8th with leader, now all of a sudden your bullpen could turn around pretty quickly and be a strength rather than a detriment. But they've really also been hurt this year by the fact that their starters cannot pitch deep into games. And by deep, I mean they can barely pitch 5 innings. So they have been going to the bullpen a lot, and they've had to play some extra inning games. And it's not an excuse because the bullpen has done its share of self-damage. But boy, they're not putting themselves in a good position. And we're going to look back and we'll be like, is Dusty Baker the manager? Why do all of our relief pitchers have 82 appearances this year? It's because they have to pitch 4 of them every game,
Yeah.
Literally every game. And Ledger's been great this year, so far. And they've gotten, Neris has been kind of up and down.
Right.
But they've got some good performances out of their bullpen, Brown and others. But boy, they've just got to get less innings out of their bullpen. They need more deep starts, and hopefully Teon can do that. Hopefully Steele can come back. And that's where Hendricks is really killing them right now more than anything else, is that, it's one thing to be Imanaga and maybe not pitch deep into games, but be super effective. So that's a good thing. But you can't be terrible and also not pitch deep into games, because then you're not helping anybody.
Right. Imanaga in the second game of the doubleheader went 6 innings.
Yes.
Gave up.
That's a season high for a Cub.
Yeah, he had 5 strikeouts, no walks. He did give up the 2 earned runs, ballooning his ERA to .84. He's been the ace, continues to be the ace. And then you get to the Sunday game, like you described. Hendricks ended up getting pulled at 56 pitches in 4 innings. So that was and the Cubs were trailing 4-3 at that point when he came out. So
I think it's telling of the confidence that Counsell has in him right now to take him out with 56 pitches. Yeah, and I was saying this on our show today, like I think he got charged for 4 runs, but one of them should have been like, it shouldn't have been an earned run in my opinion, because Swanson just airmailed a ball into the Marlins dugout on a double play that they tried
Swanson's
to get.
defense is a whole other topic of conversation we could have someday. It's really been disappointing.
Yeah,
right up there.
I haven't shut up about it on the
Good.
show.
Yes.
Yeah. So, that is what it is. But today or on Sunday, I thought he was great the first time through. He had 4 strikeouts through the first time through the order, got a lot of weak contact, and then that second time through, it was a lot more of like what we've seen. And they scored those runs on like not even 15 pitches. Like it was like 10 pitches, something like that. That they scored all those runs. There's just first pitch swing, just hard hit rockets out to the outfield. And it's just like, what is going on here? Because I'm just not used to this with Kyle Hendricks. I know he's notoriously known for struggling in April, like always getting off to a slow start, but it's at a level that I just don't think the Cubs can continue to run out there. The problem here, though, is that with Justin Steele out, like who are your other options? Like Patrick, you want to see Ben Brown go be the closer, and which again I'm open for it down the road, or if you want to test an extreme now, like all right, fine. Like you want to throw him in there now, great. I'll get up for it. I don't know if it's the right move, but I'll get up for it, right? I guess like Hayden Wesneski would be someone, but he's made 1 appearance. It was a great appearance. I'll give him that.
4 innings, that's as long as any of our starters typically pitch. So I mean,
fair enough. Fair enough. I guess like if the only thing that will negate what I'm saying is that you could give Hayden Wesneski a chance until Justin Steele comes back. We'll see. I'm also open to just skipping a Hendricks start and going with Wesneski for 1 and then going back to him and see what happens. I don't know. I don't think we'd be talking about Hendricks like this as much if Steele was healthy at this point. Because if Hendricks was like your only real issue, then I don't know. I feel like it'd be a little bit more of a longer leash. But even Assad has struggled to go more than 5, right? And I feel like he can be more effective in the bullpen, but he also shown to be very versatile anyway. Like he started games for them last year, and he did have starts where he went longer, right? Jordan Wicks, he's going through the being a rookie right now, man. Like what we saw last year, we knew at some point the league was going to kind of figure him out a little bit, and he's going to have to, learn how to not have those 30 pitch innings. So he comes out in the 5th inning with 2 outs. And so he leaves at 4 2/3 instead of 5 2/3, like he perhaps could have if he didn't have one of those innings where he throws 30 plus pitches. So those 2 guys, I believe they got to be a little bit better, even though they've kind of done as good as you could have asked with Steele being out, right? So, Tyone being back will help get some length out of the rotation. Imanaga has been way better than I could have ever expected, right? So there are some positives for sure. But as far as Hendricks goes, it's like I don't know what to really do. The only option, if you really did want to make a switch right now, is go to Wesneski.
And it's just it's a bummer as a Cubs fan, right? That we love Kyle Hendricks. We love what he's done for this team. We love watching him pitch, and he's been here for so long. And to see it, we know how the movie ends. We knew it was going to end, but I wasn't ready for. I'm not ready for this to be the end yet, and I hope that it's not. But I don't know. I don't know what you can do here.
Yeah, I think what's made me most mad about the storyline is a lot of fans have been saying, "Oh, he's been washed for like 3 years," and it's just like that's just not true, dude. It's not true at all. If you've watched him pitch, now 2022, he didn't, he wasn't great for a handful of starts, but that was largely because of a shoulder injury that he was eventually shut down for.
Right.
But he came back last year with no expectations and ended up being like, their second or third best starter last year. I felt like they were in the playoff picture because of him. So to me, like there's a small portion of the fan base that's like screaming about the fact that they picked up the option and all this for him. And I don't get why, unless you're just looking at it in hindsight.
Right. That's,
and
we all
like,
wanted it to work.
Right. We all wanted it to work. I don't get it. And another thing, I haven't really talked a lot about this, but this Hendricks thing, it's making me feel a lot better about the fact that the Cubs moved on from the other guys from 2016. Because if Chris Bryant and Javi Baez were on this team and they were playing as bad as they're playing for the Tigers and Rockies, it's almost like their legacies would be tarnished. And the things I've read about Kyle Hendricks online this year so far, it makes me real, like you said, it's a bummer. It makes me very bummed. I'm very sad, and I'm like cheering so hard for him to do well when he comes out there every fifth day, and so far we just haven't seen it. So
no, and hopefully when this team gets healthy, he can just be the fifth starter, right?
Yeah.
Like that's all you be, a fifth starter and do fifth starter things, and that be manageable. It's a real bad time for this to be this bad, just like we're talking about with Alzolay. That's
exactly
compounding the problems here. When we look at we've talked a lot about pitching. This has been a very pitching heavy show because it's been a lot of the problems. But one other story of the week has been on the offensive side. It's been the bat of Christopher Morel. Now he is slumping, as happens. He's a very streaky player. However, last week on this podcast, we talked with Michael Ernst, who mentioned, hey, he injured his finger in the San Diego series, and that is played out as that was the catalyst for this slump. Brendan Miller from CHGO, he was tweeting about it today, talking about Morel's last 50 plate appearances, just 5 hits. But the underwhelming batted ball profile, he is still making over 70% contact and walking in over 10% of plate appearances. In the past, Morel's slumps coincided with contact rates under 60% and or over-aggressive chases. So I love Brendan's takes. Always, we've had him on this show a bunch of times. It's always refreshing to hear. So this made me feel better that it's not that this isn't just the normal Christopher Morel slump, but it's it could be the injury just nagging here more than we anticipated.
I mean, at this point, I don't know if it's still the injury, but I do feel like this weekend I think he had some decent at bats. He also had some bad at bats too.
He did.
That Saturday game, the day game specifically, and this goes back to like what I was saying about how I hated the lineup. Like, I mean, you had Morel and Swanson 3-4, and those guys have been struggling. You know what I mean? With Happ not in there, Bellinger and Bush sitting, right?
Brutal.
Brutal considering how things are going right now.
Yes.
Right. My thing about Morel, the good signs, and Brendan points it out, like the walk rate is there. He's still making contact. He's not striking out like 30% of his plate appearances like he was last year. So, and to me, like those are improvements that I think that we needed to see from him this year, and if he was going to take a step forward, and it just sucks that right now he's still kind of in the slump. That said, he did hit a double yesterday. He did have a big hit in the Saturday night game. Craig Counsell said after the game that he feels like a breakout is coming. I hope he's right. They need him to hit. They need him to hit with Seiya hurt, right? So
they did.
I'm not nearly as down on him right now as I think a lot of people are, but I will say that I think he's always going to be a streaky hitter, but if he can walk like he does and not strike out nearly as much not strike out like he did last year, I think there's still plenty of value there and potential for him to get better. So, I'm very bullish about Morel. I feel like he can be an all-star, a franchise type player. I think a lot of people feel that way too. I could be wrong, but
I think so.
Yeah. So I'm a believer. And again, he's 24. And the thing about him that has always impressed me is that when he does go through these slumps, he does eventually adjust, and then he gets back on his hot streaks again, and so I hope it's right around the corner. They need it to happen. And I think the thing about this offense, like, it's been great so far this year overall, despite Seiya being hurt now. But it's like the beginning of the year, everyone was hitting except for Horner and Bellinger. And then this past week, no one was hitting except for Bellinger and Horner. So, they need to get, their top 6 guys. Well, I guess you can add Bush into that. Bush has been the most consistent guy for sure, right? They need to get all, their top 6 guys to be, at least giving some consistency. They can't all, 2 of them be slumping all at once. You know what I mean? We just need some consistency out of all of them. I think the offense will at least be a little bit more pleasurable to watch with Seiya out, at least. So
sorry, I had to leave there for a minute. The Marriott chain of hotels doesn't provide the best internet at all times, and they cut me off, but I'm back. I heard your conversation about Morel, though, and when I was talking to somebody with the Cubs back when Morel first came up with the big hot streak, and one of the things I was cautioned about at the time was they said, he's a really streaky hitter, right? That was his sort of his reputation. And a lot of that was also swing and miss stuff back then too. And then that's why I was so frustrated last year in April. Remember when he was tearing it up in Iowa? And I'm like, well, if he's a streaky hitter and he's tearing it up, wouldn't we want to have him tear it up at the major league level? And they finally brought him up, and then he continued to tear it up. Imagine had they brought him up a couple weeks earlier, he could have had a monster year because he was just in such a prolonged hot streak. So you have to hope it comes back to that. But yeah, statistically right now, he's the worst hitter on the team pretty much, and that can't continue. And I know there was speculation that maybe it was his thumb that got hit on that pitch, and maybe that had something to do with it. But he is one of those guys, though, who, if he's going to provide value, it's going to be offensively primarily. So he does need to hit, because finding a spot for him defensively is a little bit trickier. Now, having a lot of outfielders hurt right now kind of opens things up a little bit. And frankly, to your earlier point about seeing what you have, I feel like I know what we have in Patrick Wisdom. And Patrick Wisdom is not going to be on the next Cubs World Series championship team, I don't believe, at least in a playing capacity. So I would much prefer to ride it out longer than the Cubs normally do with some of the younger players, and see literally, can they work out of slumps, can they do things? I mean, don't put them in a position to absolutely fail, but you got to give them more rope than maybe you would in a different scenario. I mean, when the Cubs were in the height of their success in 16 and 17 and 18, 19, you saw they would send Schwarber to the minors. They sent Happ down. Well, they were in pennant races at all times during those seasons, so they really needed production, then. This is more akin to early 2015 before they hit their big hot streak, when, you didn't really have that same, you weren't in that same position, and they can just go out there and see what these guys can do. And I'd rather do that than just see what a 33-year-old can do, because we know the answer to that.
Well, that on days they're not going to play Morel, they will play Madrigal at third.
Right. Right, because we want to see what he can do.
But I hear what you're saying, and I think Wisdom's role is pretty much set. He's going to be a very matchup based power bat off the bench, basically. I'd be surprised if we see him at third very often. I think he played third a little bit this weekend, but I just don't see it a ton. So unless more injuries happen, knock on wood. But I think with Morel, it's just one of those things that you got to play out. I just feel like he could be that diamond in the rough that, we talk about other organizations finding and turning into an all-star caliber player. I wish I could think of an example, like maybe like Max Muncy, was like just kind of thrown away, and the Dodgers picked him up, and he's one of the bigger power bats on their team, right? It has been
Maybe
the last
Lou
couple of
Brock.
years.
That name always seems to ring a bell. I mean, I wasn't around for those, but
Yeah.
from what I've heard,
Justin Turner is another guy. Like he wasn't very good before he got to the Dodgers, and they maybe he was a late bloomer. But the thing about Morel is that like he's 24, and
he's young.
I know fans are excited about Matt Shaw and all this, but like, if you can get decent innings out of him at third in terms of Morel, until then, and then figure it out with him after that, like fine. I think Matt Shaw. I think Matt Shaw is going to be a good major league player. We'll see, and we'll see how big the role is whenever he comes up. But Morel is just too young and raw to like give up on now. Like it's got to be something that like down the road. But I understand some of the frustration behind it, but. I hope that he is
to be the most dominant offensive force on the team.
For sure, yeah.
And he has been during stretches of the last several seasons in ways that nobody else really is. I mean, Bellinger maybe a little bit last year, but you got a lot of guys on this team who are kind of steady eddies or like Swanson, sort of unsteady eddies. But and a lot of number 6 hitters and 7 hitters and maybe some 5 hitters. But when Morel is hot, I mean, he's a cleanup hitter. He's like a legit cleanup hitter.
Yeah.
Switching gears a little bit. I went down to St. Louis, Missouri on Sunday, and
I'm sorry.
How long was your sentence for? Just a day?
One night. Yes, I spent one night in St. Louis. I went down to see the AEW Dynasty pay-per-view. I was not going to miss Will Ospreay and Bryan Danielson in person. I was not going to miss Swerve Strickland.
I don't know what those words mean, but it sounds great.
Against Samoa Joe. Yes, I had to be at AEW down in. So I went down to St. Louis for wrestling, and it turned out. I got there early enough that I'm like, well, where am I going to go for lunch? Oh, might as well just go to the ballpark because a game was starting in 15 minutes. So
was it hard to get a ticket, though? I mean, the St. Louis Cardinals fans are the best in the world. I bet you must really had to pay a lot over market value in the sold-out game.
You'd be surprised. The paid attendance was over 40,000 on this Sunday game. I was able to,
but a lot of empty seats, though, right?
A lot of people dressed as chairs, and I was able to snag a ticket 15 minutes before game time for $30, 10 rows up off the field between first base and right field there. So. Fantastic seats in the sun. These were great. It's a nice ballpark. So it was a fine. I got to see the Brewers play the Cardinals. As I was trying to figure out who to root for. I was rooting for just the earth to open up and swallow this whole thing. But no, I was rooting for Wilson Contreras. I found I could root for Wilson as he's one of the best offensive players in baseball right now, and he's always fun to watch. So I'm watching this game. Colin Ray pitching for the Brewers, Sonny Gray for the Cardinals. Play of the game happens in the first inning. The Brewers center fielder, Blake Perkins, he catches a ball that would have been a 3-run home run, pulls it back in, caught it over the wall, pulled it back in, robbing the 3-run home run. No runs after that. So it was 0-0 for the next 7 innings. In the 7th, Gray gives up 2 hits. Cardinals manager, Marmol, comes out to visit the mound. And I'm like, well, obviously they're taking out Gray here. No, decides keeping in Sonny Gray, and he gives up another hit, scoring those 2 guys. So it's a 2-0 game. That was the difference. Brewers win 2-0. My takeaway from watching these 2 teams play, the 2 biggest threats to your Chicago Cubs, I watched them play each other. I am not afraid of either of these lineups or pitching staffs. There is, we were talking about dominant players, potential for the Cubs. There's 0 here. If Yelich is not being Yelich, you've got nobody else who's who should really scare you in either of these lineups, especially the Cardinals. I'm looking at, we do it every time we see the Brewers. We're just scratching our heads like, how is this team good ever? And they always seem to be. But looking at this Cardinals lineup, wow, it was brutal. The team was playing poorly, and they were managed even worse. It was shocking to me.
Yeah, they got swept at home by Milwaukee. Like, yeah, it's weird for me to say that like it's like this. I can't believe it. And also I can't believe the Cardinals gave Marmol a contract extension after what happened last year. And then they tried to band-aid up their pitching staff with old veterans. Sonny Gray was a nice signing for sure. Would have liked for the Cubs to maybe be in on that, but whatever. Milwaukee, I'm going to clap back a little bit on that. I think their offense is improved compared to like recent years. Like William Contreras is off to a great start this year.
Yes, he is.
And I do think Jackson Chirios is going to be a guy that we all really hate at some point. If not on May 3rd, sometime later in the year. You know what I mean? So, but I will say the pitching doesn't scare me, and that's probably good that I'm not scared by that more so than the offense.
That used to be the story for so long with that team.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Brewers, roles have reversed now. Like now, I'm just afraid, right?
Like at the end of August, Jeremy, I remember in the bleachers for that Brewers Cubs game, and it's like, boy, the Brewers pitching is so good. But look at their lineup; they got two guys hitting over like 220 in the whole lineup, and now it's just the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
It's Freddie Peralta and just a bunch of whatevers.
Wade Miley.
Yeah, you know, Colin Ray, whatever.
Colin Ray, former Cub Colin Ray.
Yes. Yeah. But then that lineup is really solidified around with the younger players too, in particular.
Yeah.
Kerrang is having a great start, Churio and people like that. So
yeah. I just think the Cubs, the one thing that they have over any other team in the division is they just have better depth. Like, I think that like it's very telling that we've seen the injuries that the Cubs have had, and they're 13-9.
Sure.
You know, like, yes, they absolutely should probably have 4 more wins, right? They should have 17 wins and clear, like not necessarily running away with the division, but just in first place right now, right? But I just think being 13-9, when you talk about the injuries, if you had told me all this without context of how they got to this point, like I think we'd all take that, considering the schedule to start the year, you know.
Meanwhile, there's a rumor that Paul Goldschmidt was filing for Social Security retirement the other day. I don't know if that's true or not, but
Goldschmidt and Arenado combined have 2 home runs.
Wow. Yeah, and combined they're like 70 or something years old. So you're seeing a team of old people in the Cardinals, starting pitching and those guys, that the 2 key corner fielders who probably are going to only wear down more as the season goes on. So that's the pleasant thought. The Cubs are actually a fairly young enough team, you know, younger in their prime team.
Yeah.
So yeah, that does give you some confidence or some hope anyway.
Yeah. All right, so let's quickly look ahead, quick predictions for the week that will be, and then we will close out talking about the 84 Cubs as we always do. Let's start with the week that will be. 3 at home against the Houston Astros, then 3 in Boston, and then they continue the road trip at the New York Mets. We'll just look at the first 6 games coming up here. 3 at home, 3 on the road, Houston and Boston. Cody, we'll start with you. Predictions for this week. What's the record?
So what, they have 3 against the Astros and 3 against Boston, so 6 games. I'll go 4-2. I'll go 4-2. I think they win both series. I'd like to say 5-1, but I expect one to be really annoying loss.
Pat?
You know, the Astros have played really poorly this year.
Really surprisingly, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think they're as good as they've been the last few years. I don't think they're this bad at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're due for a turnaround, and when they do turn it around, I think they're going to clobber some teams, frankly, because they've got a lot of like extra runs to make up for that they haven't scored. I don't think it'll be this week against the Cubs, though, necessarily. I think this is a week and maybe I'm being a little bullish here, but I think this is a week when, looking at the starting pitching matchups, I'm going to go. I think the safe bet's 3-3, but I too am going to say 4-2, like Cody, and I think that this will be an odd week, and then I think the Cubs will lose 2 games fairly decisively, and they'll win a couple close games because, baseball has this weird way of just kind of evening out over time. And we have enough Cub players who are due to break out of their mini slumps here. The Cubs have some favorable pitching matchups. They're going to be at home for the first 3 games. I say this is going to be a decent week given the circumstances against teams that I think overall at the end of the year are not going to be terrible teams. So
yeah. I honestly could see them going 6-0, like with how the Astros are playing right now.
8-0, and which would be crazy because it's a 6-game series. But
I'll make it unanimous.
I'm not a believer in the Red Sox, and you're getting the Astros at the right time. But this Cubs team right now just has some issues, and so it's hard to say, oh yeah, they're gonna rile off 6 in a row now after splitting with the Marlins. But baseball is weird. It would for something like that to happen and then win 6 in a row, it's pretty crazy. So
mark my words, the Cubs win that Saturday Hendricks game 11-9.
There you go.
Yes, well, I'll make it unanimous 4-2 for the week for the Cubs. With that, I'll throw it to you, Pat. Let's close it out talking about in case you're dropping into the podcast for the first time in a while, you haven't heard us every single week this season. We are revisiting the 40th anniversary of the 1984 playoff Chicago Cubs team.
First playoff team in Chicago Cubs history post 1945. So, it's been a long stretch.
Exactly, and a very important team and a team we want to celebrate here. So we've been revisiting their weeks every week here on the podcast. Where are we now in 1984, Pat?
Well, because in those days there was a sort of an agreement to start seasons at a normal time rather than in March. We were a little bit behind where the Cubs are this year, but we were in week 3. The Cubs had a West Coast trip to start the season. They had come home. They'd been battling a lot of rainouts. And they managed, I think last time we talked, they just had another rain out. So they played, after being off like 3 days in a row, a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, they played a doubleheader against the Cardinals on Wednesday, and then they played a game on Thursday. And then they had a 3-game set against the Pirates, all at home. So this was an opportunity for the Cubs to sort of set themselves apart from the rest of the division. They managed, thankfully, to take 2 out of 3 from the Cardinals. Sadly, they split the doubleheader, as often happens. Joaquin Andujar was the starter for the Cardinals. Some people might remember him. He was a good pitcher. But then Scott Sanderson won the nightcap. Cubs turned around and Steve Trout won the next game. Interesting in those days on the Wednesday game. So back then when they played doubleheaders, it wasn't this play a day game, clear the stadium, play a night game. It was first games at noon, second games at 3. And so they would play back to back, and you could come for both games. And on that Wednesday, we had 5,800 fans who decided to come out for one of the 2 games, if not both of them. Kind of that's one of those close the upper deck days, which they used to do back in the old days. We were about a month and a half away from that never happening again. But at this point in time, that was standard operating procedure at Wrigley Field on a weekday, which is not having the upper deck open. So just to put some things in a little bit of perspective from today's day, it was almost like, we might see the White Sox, for example, end up having to close the upper deck this year at some point, if not for the rest of the year. They then went into the weekend against the Pirates, where they managed to win 1 out of 2 games against the Pirates. The third game, of course, was a Sunday game that got, wait for it, rained out. Yet another rain out in the season. I'm going to highlight today the Friday game played in front of 22,000 fans, because that was a game where the Cubs were tied, and they fell behind. They tied it up. They went into extra innings in that game, and it was in the 10th inning. The Cubs won the game in a walk-off, 5-4. And what was interesting about that, first of all, The Pirates had their ace closer in the game, Kent Tekulve. I don't know if you ever remember. He's that submarine pitcher. He weighed about 108 pounds, and he was super skinny, and he would whip the ball like underhand to home plate, which they don't teach anymore. I think at the I can only imagine when those 3D machines trying to like look at his actual pitching and try to figure out like what he needs to do right in order to get his mechanics fixed. They would the machine would break if they saw Kent Tekulve ever pitch. It was very effective. The game in the 10th inning, bottom of the 10th, they had no ghost runners back then, of course, either. Cubs led off with a triple by red hot Ryan Sandberg, who just had moved over to second base that season after playing 1 year at third base in his sophomore campaign. They had a couple of walks, and then a guy by the name of Mel Hall walked it off at the base hit. The reason I highlight that game in Mel Hall is that Mel Hall had come up the previous year. He was a top prospect for the Cubs. Like, he was the deal, the real deal. And there was a lot of hope for him. But very sort of strangely, the Cubs had made this trade, as we talked about in previous podcasts, at the end of March, third to last day of spring training, where they brought in Gary Matthews, Sarge, and Bob Dernier to play left field and center field respectively. And this caused a lot of upheaval in the lineup because, well, Jody Davis was the catcher, Sandberg was at second, Boa was the shortstop, and Ron Say, the Penguin, was at third. The Cubs found themselves in this awkward position of having like five guys to play between right field / or maybe even left field, depending on Matthews, and first base. They had Bill Buckner, who'd been the first baseman for years, Leon Durham, who was the up-and-coming first baseman on this team. They had Keith Moreland, who they had a lot of hope for, and they had Mel Hall. So they had like just a plethora of players. And they had been trying all through April to juggle all these guys in the lineup. And it reminds me a little bit of this Cubs team, and this is why I bring it up. It was a combination of veteran players like a Buckner who had, been through a lot and had won the batting crown and was like a proven guy, but was, on the other side of 30 at this time. You had the Michael Bush types like Leon Durham, who was the next big thing. And then you had these young guys like Mel Hall and Keith Moreland, who, you had high hopes for, but collectively had just a couple hundred at bats total. And so the question was going to be like, how do you juggle this? How do you play these guys? What do you do with Gary Matthews? He's an older player, but he's playing well. He's your Ian Happ, basically, in the lineup, right? And so it was going to be very interesting to see how they would manage this. It didn't help that they had a rain out pretty much every other day so far in the season at the point that we're at. And so in the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk about how they sort of started making some trades and making some moves and how they kind of opened up the roster a little bit. In ways that inured to their benefit, because the one thing they were kind of shy on was they could use a little help with the starting pitching. And sure enough, that would be coming. So the Cubs are 8-5. It was one of the best starts they'd had in 20 years. So, all was well in Wrigleyville at this point, but there were some discontent festering in the clubhouse from some players who wanted more playing time.
All right. Looking forward to, I love when we started this, we ran down the starting pitchers, the starting pitchers for the 84 team as of opening day.
Dick Ruffin, Chuck Rainey, Steve Trout, and Scott Sanderson, 4-man rotation, which is all you need if you're only going to play like 2 games every 4 days, I guess.
The only thing I can say about the 84 team now, because I wasn't alive for it, so I didn't get to experience it like some people, like you guys. I unintentionally made Jody Davis really mad on Twitter. Like, I don't know, like probably like a month and a half ago. It was like back when the Chris Bryant story came out with the Rockies and how he basically said that he didn't, do enough research on the Rockies.
Mistakes were made.
Or whatever. Yeah, mistakes were made.
By him.
By him. And I was just, he's one of my all-time favorite players. So, I was tweeting about how like his downfall has just been so sad. And I said something along the lines, to at least to me, in my opinion, he is like a top 5 talent in Cubs history. Like, that doesn't mean that he's a top 5 player. It just means that I think his talent to me, he was in path to go to the Hall of Fame after 2016 and 2017, especially. You can argue in 2017 he was better than in 2016 if you go by WAR and all those other advanced metrics, right? But
Sure.
so like all I was saying is like the downfall, like things that have happened since he left the Cubs is just so sad. And even when he was on the Cubs, he had all those injury problems.
Yeah.
Right. So all I was saying is that like he was a top 5 talent in Cubs history, in my opinion. And Jody Davis was like, I don't even remember what he said, but he replied to my tweet that like blew up, and that brought in a bunch of people who were like yelling, who proceeded to yell at me some more. And
Did Jody think that Chris Bryant was in fact the greatest talent, or do you think he?
I think
he was a top 5 member?
I think he took it as I was saying that Chris Bryant was a top 5 player in Cubs history, which I was not. I have said this before though, that I think when it comes to like pillars, I think he has one of the biggest ones, because no one has done what he's done for the Cubs, as in win Rookie of the Year, win MVP, and be the leader in some aspects to winning the World Series. That's just my own like little ranking for myself. It's not necessarily to say that he's the greatest Cub in history or anything like that. It's just, to me, like he did something that no one else in the organization has ever done. You know what I mean?
If you're Elton John, he's your candle in the wind, is what you're saying to us. He's your Marilyn Monroe, right?
I guess. But like, I just remember Jody Davis replied to it and was like, Are you saying Chris Bryant's a top 5 player in Cubs history? I'm like, no, I did not say that, dude. But it just like, I guess he got the insinuation, and then it then started like a domino effect of people on Twitter thinking that I was saying that too. And then,
so you've got guys who you think are tremendous talents, right?
Mhm.
And there are a lot of guys who were tremendous talents, but never got off the ground, right? And then you've got this small group of guys who are tremendous talents, who were tremendous players for a tremendously short period of time, and then fell down. And then you've got the guys who have these long, careers that are sort of unquestionable, like the Billy Williams and the Ernie Banks and the Fergie Jenkins. I look at Bryant in the same class as I do like a Mark Pryor, and some of these other guys who
Kerry Wood,
who proved that they were top shelf, but just mostly for injuries, or for other reasons, potentially. Just never were able to do it. And Kerry Wood, although Kerry Wood did manage to, although he managed to come back in less than the dominant fashion that he once had, right?
Yeah.
But Pryor and Bryant are very similar in this regard, in that they both were like top notch. Bryant even better, I guess, than Pryor, really, I'd say. And then they just kind of fell off the cliff.
Yeah. It's truly sad, because like, and we've been doing this podcast for so long now, but like, I'm going to go on one more tangent. Like the Cubs Cornerstones, like series that they're doing on Marquee, they did one for Mark Pryor. And honestly, it's just like watching a slow, painful death with no really good ending at the end, other than, he crafted out a really good coaching career with the Dodgers. Great. But like,
ran into the Braves second baseman. We never heard from him again.
Well, I'm like, why did y'all do this? This is just gonna make us sad. Like, honestly,
it's like leaving Las Vegas. Really, it's just a sad movie.
And it's
no
like,
point.
It's like with Mark Pryor, it's obviously his 2003 season was so good and he was dominant and all this, but then like the last game that he's on the mound was a game that all of us wish that we either. We wish we weren't at, and wish we could just remove from history, like at least that season. And then after that, that's when the injuries really started. And it's just like, like, I don't know. At least with Bryant, he did win here, know.
Right. There is a happiness to the
right. So,
and like we said at the top of the show, time flies when we're catching up with Cody and having a good time.
Jeremy's got us on the clock here.
We are up against it. Yeah, we've got to get wrapping this up. So, Cody Delmendo, as always, a pleasure when you come on here and talk Cubs with us. Please remind all of our listeners where they can find your work on the internet.
I'm on Instagram and TikTok and Twitter at Cody_CHGO and CHGO Cubs podcast, CHGO_Cubs on Twitter and Instagram. CHGO Sports, on like every social platform out there. Obviously, all our shows, all the Cubs podcast, you can watch live on YouTube or in podcast feeds, just like where you're probably listening to this. But CHGO Sports YouTube channel, we go live after every game during the season, except on Fridays and Saturdays. So if you are looking for someone to yell into, or if you're looking for something to yell into the comment section, we are the people to come to, because that's what a lot of people do.
If you want to yell at Cody directly, just go to Murphy's Bleachers before any Friday Cubs game. Right?
Yeah. We were talking about this before the show. We're doing this thing during the Cubs season this year. We're calling it Friday 120 Club. We even have a shirt, which is a really cool shirt, by the way. Where it's kind of like a community building thing, just inviting people to come hang out with me and my good friend Greg Braggs, who does CHGO Bears. And we just hang out at Murphy's from like 10 to noon and then go to the park. We hang out in the bleachers, left field usually, and then we go to Almost Home, which is the bar right directly or diagonally across from Obvious Shirt Stores there in Wrigley. Yeah, Grayson Clark. And again, at Almost Home, and just kind of have a couple of post-game beers. And again, it's a community building thing. But it's we're just trying to create some sort of fun time for other Cubs fans, I guess you could say. So hope to see you guys out there. And check out the show, check out the network we got. If you're a Chicago sports fan, I think it's a great spot to check out. Listen to other people talk about Chicago sports.
100% couldn't agree more. And while you're watching their YouTube channel, it's fine to just pop on over to our YouTube channel to give us a like and subscribe there as well. Search for Wrigleyville Nation Podcast on YouTube. We are trying to build up our subscriber base there as we launch the video version of this podcast. If you consume the video version of the podcast, it is now up every single week on the YouTube channel over there. So throw a subscription. It helps us work the algorithm so other Cub fans can find the show. Make sure you're following us on all our socials at Wrigleyville Nat. That's X, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads. We got them all. And so come follow us on all of the social media platforms. And of course, WrigleyvilleNation.com has all the links that we described, the entire back catalog of this podcast. And with that, we are calling it a show. Cody, thank you for joining us. Pat, thank you for joining us.
Jody Davis just texted me. He said, Cody, he said, it's all good. You're all good.
Awesome.
Don't worry about
I feel so much better now.
I knew you would. Yeah.
Thanks again. Thanks again, everyone, for listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.